Hi guys, welcome back. And we've still got our issue with our computer, so we're just doing a little GoPro video again today, but I'll give you a little bit more detail in this one than what I did last time and expand a few things out. Now with our new computer, we got all the parts this week and our son Bill, our computer whiz, put it all together, but there was a problem with the motherboard and it wouldn't actually power up. So much diagnostic and much pulling apart and running down to just the basic pieces with a power supply and a motherboard there, and we couldn't get it past the point of just having a few flashy lights come on and the board itself wouldn't power up. So it's now winging its way back to Melbourne town on the other side of Australia, and they're going to have a look at it and then decide what's going to happen, and hopefully we'll have a new one before too much longer. So in the meantime, we're down to our little GoPro videos and one-take wonders. So if there's any big muff-ups, forgive me for that, and we'll just go from there. So what I've been working on, this is a support for the floor out of the back of the old Kingswood ute, and it runs on the right-hand side from the wheel well up to the back cabin wall, and the wooden floor in the back of the vehicle sits on here. Now this one here, a bit rusty and ordinary, and could have sat there and filled them with weld, but it's a pretty average sort of repair. Could have cut that out and welded a piece in there, but once again there's rust pits up here and it's all just a little bit second-hand. So I opted to make a new one. So when we start with a new one, we've got to get the profile right, and I always start by doing a few little test panels in the press brake. Now this panel tapers from the back to the front, so we've got a back section and a front section, so that's actually the taper run out from one end to the other. But the main thing is to get all of the folds in the right spot. So that's the back end one there, it works nicely. And I've done a few for the front ends, but I think this is, yeah, that one's pretty close. So I'd say that was probably the finished one that got the measurements there. The problems you get with any sort of folder is getting two folds close to each other. You've got limitations because we've got the edge of the V-block on the press brake, and we've also got the apron on the pan brake, which will limit how close we can go. So I got this one to work on a small V, and that gave me plenty of room. I could get in there close enough to actually get it to go. The press brake would have come in a little bit closer, but I didn't need to do that, and so I chose a V that would work. The only problem I had then was that these radiuses in here were way too tight. So when we look at the original, we have got nice radiused corners on them where it was actually stamped from the die originally, and our replacement piece has got these square corners. So I couldn't actually go to a wider V-block on the bottom of the press brake, which would have changed the radius. So what I've done is I've made a slipper for it. So we come over here and have a bit of a look. So the slipper is just a folded piece of metal, and I've attached it with these two straps, and when we actually fold in there now, it changes this inside radius. So let's grab the piece that I made. So here's the part I've folded, and it's got the same nice radiuses on the corners that the original piece has. And so that all worked nicely. So that's job's done there. And this is what I'm talking about. The limitations are how far we've got from this face on the V-block to the blade. And that's how close we can actually get in to get our second bend, because this has got to actually sit in under there in the folding process. So that's where my problems were. The other problem I had, and I mucked this one up as it dropped out, there's only a 1/4 of an inch fold on the back, so it's only 6 millimetres, and it's actually got to perch across the V. So when it's still a flat piece, it's got to pick up this inside edge before we can fold it. And when I folded this one end dropped off, and then I had another bite at it and it curled the other end around, so I've actually hammered this one down. And this panel would work all right, it just looks a little bit ugly, but the ugly's hidden underneath the floor of the ute when it all goes back together. The next challenge is putting this little dimple in the end. Now there's a drain tube that goes through the floor of the vehicle and drops out underneath the car, and it fits into this recess. So I made a little bit of tooling last night, and it actually made this nice little dimple. And this is simple. I make a lot of these sorts of things, and it's always one of those things. Keep them as simple as you possibly can. So I machined this collar up out of an offcut from under my lathe, and it's got the basis the cup that it's going to press into that fits on the back. And because this was an off-cut, a piece of waste, it had already been used for something else, the inside had been machined out, I've just spotted a washer on the back to actually centre the bolt into it. So that sits in there nice like that. 2 washers were exactly what we needed to make the recess match the original. So that's what I've used on the top. So when I've put it together on this, I've gone through there on my flat piece of metal, dropped that on there, put a flat plate on the top, and then just run the nut down, pulled it up nice and tight with a couple of spanners, and voila, the job's done. We've got a factory looking pressing, just like that. And once again, very simple tool, and I made the whole thing in about 20 minutes, start to finish. So that's sort of the simple things you've got to be looking at all the time while you're shaping metal. Now, while you're here, I've been working on the old Dodgy Dodge, and this is sort of the day job. Daryl and Suzanne have employed us to do this car for them, so it's been in the shed for a while, and it's actually what's feeding us at the moment. But when we did our last body filling video, we had a query about guide coats and finishing with a finer grade of paper. So that's what I'm going to do now. This is a door I've made, so it needed a little skimmer body filler over it. It's not very thick anywhere, and it just takes out the little ripples and creates a surface for the paint that's just smooth everywhere. But at the moment, it's been finished with 40 grit, so it's got these big coarse lines in there, which if we put a high build primer over that, we do run the risk of it sinking back into those. So if we guide coat it now, we can see all of those, we'll sand it with an 80 grit, and we'll get rid of those coarse scratches. So guide coats are easy. I'm just going to use a spray gun. Now this one's got a bit of flat black paint in it, and it's a 1-pack product, so it just stays in this gun all the time. The worst thing that happens is the nozzle blocks up, and this little air cap will get a bit of a film paint around it from time to time. So to fix that, you take it off, put it on the wrong way around, pull the trigger, give it a bit of a rock that way, and it'll clean any paint out of the air hole around it, and it'll work. The other thing that you get with leaving 1-pack products in spray guns is the paint solids will drop to the bottom of the pot. Give them a shake, yeah, that's fine, but you've still got a tube full of thinner reducer in there, which when you pull the trigger is going to come out straight away. So I'm just in the habit of putting my finger over the end of it, give it a bit of a blast with the air, and that pushes that back down the suction tube and into the pot, and it can mix with the other paint. So for a guide coat, we just stand back, light layer of paint, easy as that. We just want to get a speckledy layer on it, and the same thing when we're doing our primers and things like that, we use a guide coat, and this can be anything. A spray can will do the same job. We just want a paint that's going to dry fast. The only thing is, if you're doing a guide coat on primers and you're using a 2K primer, do it when the paint is wet. Otherwise, being a 2-pack product, once it cures, the guide coat will just go on top and it will brush off. So it's not going to be any good to you. So always apply that to wet paint, but on body filler, it's got to be cured. We're not trying to put it onto wet filler. So get that down there, and if you're actually at the 40 grit stage and you're still roughing it into shape and you're having trouble getting the shape right, sometimes a guide coat just on your filler before you start sanding it will show up the high spots and the low spots, and it's an easier way to read it as well. So there's no shame in putting a guide coat on your body fillers, even for the roughing stage. Now we've got our 3M purple clean system. Now these are Velcro. I'm just going to take my 40 grit one off, and I'm going to put an 80 grit one on there. Now these are great for particularly people at home because you don't have anything with an adhesive on there that you've got to tear off or something like that, and you can swap from one to the other and back and forth and all that sort of stuff. So I highly recommend these. These are great. But that's pretty much cured. So if we start rubbing across it, we can see straight away, we've got a bit of a high in here because we've cut through all the scratches in that area. There's a little low in there, there's a little low just in there. but I can just feel that one now. That's a very fine one. Primer would fill that. But see how easy it is to pick up your highs and lows with the guide coat. So, now, a nice big block like this one, a lot of surface area. Doesn't really matter which way we sand it. We can sand it up and down the panel or along the panel. But what we're trying to do is finish the filler and get rid of these 40 grit lines out of it. So see in this, it's all cleaned up here. We've still got these lines up here to work out of it, but we've still got this little low down here, and there's enough material on the door that I can sand across this area and take that out. That's coming up nice. So that's pretty much got that sorted there. We'll go further. I can get rid of all of these little scratches in there. I can get rid of that little low in there, and I can bring that up. And once the whole door's like this, 80 grit is the coarsest scratch we've got on there. And from there, we can go to our next layer of primer. Now with this car, I'm going to do a spray polyester layer over the whole thing, and it's like a sprayable body filler. But I'll rough that with 80 grit, and then I'll do a fine cut after a guide coat with a 180, and then my high build primer that goes on top of that doesn't actually have to fill any big deep scratches. And the reason that I'm chasing it like this is that all of your product will shrink. This body filler will shrink a bit, the polyester will shrink a bit, but once you get to the primer layers, they will shrink more than these will. So we've given this time to cure. This was done yesterday. I'll get this primed into polyester today. I'll give the polyester probably 4 or 5 weeks to harden up nice and let that cure up completely. Then I can block that and I can go to a high build primer, and from there the car's ready to paint. So the longer I leave each layer, the more chance I have of all the shrinking being gone from it, and my paint job's going to be good for years to come. So that's what we're aiming for. So what we'll do is we'll have a quick walk around the Dodge and show you where I'm at with it, but I'm in the fine tuning stage. I'm just got a lot of little filler areas that I'm just nitpicking and trying to get really nice. So I've got the basic tub shape sorted out, and across on the other side I've got a bit of a weld through there. I actually had a little bit of a dip in the bead line that was noticeable when you sighted from the front to the back of the car. So I split the quarter panel and I put a big steel plate on the top of it and some clamps, and I pulled it up and I got the bead line to run nice and straight. And then while it was all clamped in position, I welded the gap back up, and I've got that sorted. So I'm finishing that little area over there. I've got a lot of areas in the wheel wells where I've done plug welds, and there's just little ripples around that. Now with these cars, these areas were normally body colour on them at this generation. So although it will be visible, it's not going to be a focal point. So I'm just going to do a little skim of filler over there just to hide most of these little ripples and bits and pieces. And once the car's assembled up, it'll have a black fender, and I'm told the car's going to be a deep red burgundy sort of colour. That'll shine through past the wheel, and although you're not going to be able to sight on it and get a good reflection off it, we don't really want any of these imperfections staring back at us either. So I'm just going to take a bit of time, get them looking nice. And the other area I'm putting a bit of time in, you come around here, Deb, look back in here, is this seat back area. Now, this car had been made into a ute back in the Depression, and so the back of the seat became the front wall of the ute body. So all of the things that have been thrown in the back of the vehicle and bounced around in there had been clobbering away on this panel. And when I started working on it, it was caved right in. It was really badly damaged. And so I've spent a bit of time beating it all out, trying to get these bead lines back to where they should be. But there was a lot of little lumps and bumps and ripples in here. Now this is upholstered from this line down to the bottom. The top piece is body colour. So this area I've got to get really nice, and I've got a little low spot just in here to get out, and a couple of little ripples around the spots where the road rail goes on it. And so that'll be body colour in there. And this piece down here, although I've put filler in it and got it reasonable, I don't have to get it to paint perfection because it's going to be padded and it'll have a layer of leather over the top of that. But had I left all the lumps and bumps in there, there was the risk of sitting in the back seat and looking forward to that and seeing a few little bits and pieces that were out of whack. So I've taken the time to get that to the stage where it's nice but not perfect, but it'll be great once it's trimmed. So there you go guys, bit of an update in the shed. Sorry we don't have a full-length feature on a how-to this week, but as soon as we've got our computer up and running, we'll be back to our normal style of videos. I'm Rob Teal. Thanks guys, we'll catch you next time.